Welcome back. In this lecture, we'll learn exception handling. So we use try, except and finally blocks for handling exceptions. Try block, the execution stops when there is an abnormal event in the try block, and except block is used to catch the exception that is raised in the try block. And as soon as we catch the exception in the except block, the flow becomes normal. Finally block gets executed regardless of the result of the try and except blocks. Finally block is used to clean up resources, that is for file closing or database connection closing, etc. And we'll cover the following topics: how to use try and except blocks, how to use more than one except block, and use else keyword to execute a block of code when there are no exceptions raised, and how to use the finally block, and how to use raise keyword to throw or raise an user-friendly exception. Now let's see the demo. Go to our IDE PyCharm or project practice new Python file, and let's name it exception handling. Now let's add the comment exception handling demo. Let's add a statement print 2 divided by 0, and let's save it. Right click, run exception handling. So now we get the error 0 division error, division by 0. So this is an abnormal event. So now let's see how to use try catch blocks to catch the exceptions. So inside try block, so add the indentation and add except block by using except keyword, and let's catch the exception by adding a statement. An exception occurred in the try block. So an abnormal event, that is 0 division error, division by 0, occurred in the try block, and we caught the exception in the except block. Now let's save it and rerun. So now we can see the exception that is raised in the try block is caught in the except block, and we see the statement an exception occurred in the try block is printed in the console by using the print function. So that is how we can use the try and except blocks to catch the exception. So let's add the comment try and except blocks. So let's add it in the print function as well, so we can see in the console as well. Let's try to print test value is test. So test is a variable which is not created yet. Now let's try to run it. So now we can see name error, name test is not defined. So we didn't define the variable test anywhere, so that's the reason we are getting an exception here. Now let's catch this exception by using try catch blocks. Try, and here add the indentation, and within the except block try to catch the exception. Now let's add the print function and add a comment, please define test variable. Now let's try to rerun this. So now we can see we're not seeing name error, and it is caught by the except block. So we are seeing the message, please define test variable. Let's see one more. Let's create an integer variable by using the int constructor, and also ask the user to enter the value by using the input function enter age, and let's try to print age. So now here we are using the int constructor, that is we are accepting only integer values for the variable age. So now let's save it and run. Enter age, so let's enter 10. So 10 is printed in the console. So now let's rerun and enter age. Instead of an integer variable, let's assign a floating point variable. So now we can see value error, invalid literal for int with base 10, line number 15. Since we are required to pass only the integer variables for the value age, whereas we are passing a floating point variable for age. So that's the reason we are getting value error. So now let's try to catch the error by using try catch blocks. Add the indentation, that is space at the beginning of the code line, and within the except block let's pass the comment, please enter age value in numbers only. Now let's try to rerun this, and in this case let's enter a string value test other than an integer. I hit enter. So now we can see please enter age value in numbers only, and we are not seeing the value error because we caught the exception inside the except block, and we are printing the message please enter age value in numbers only using the print function. So that is how we can write try and catch blocks. The next one is how to use more than one except block. So we can write more than one except block. Let's print the same comment so we can see in the console. Let's take the same code, try and except block. Now let's add one more except block, more than one except blocks. So another except block, error code 0 division error. Let's try to print 0 division error occurred, and inside another except block we see an exception occurred in the try block. So this is more specific to the error that we are seeing inside the try block, more specific to the most generic. So that is how the execution happens, most specific to the most generic. So this is the most specific that is related to the exception that is happening inside the try block. So that is why we should see 0 division error occurred instead of an exception occurred in the try block. So now let's save it and run it. So enter age. Now we can see 0 division error occurred inside more than one except block instead of an exception occurred in the try block. So the except block catches the exception that is most specific to the error that is happening inside the try block than the exception that is most generic. This is most specific and this is most generic. So let me add that comment as well. This is most generic and this is most specific to the error that is happening inside the try block. Now let's see how to use else keyword to execute a block of code when there are no exceptions raised. So let me add the comment else keyword to the print function so we can see in the console. So let's add a try block, and inside the try block let's add a print function and pass exception handling. There is no exception in this, so we are just trying to print exception handling. And let's add the except block and print an exception occurred. And now let's use the else keyword and try to print easy to learn. So if you see, we are not getting any exception inside the try block. We are just trying to print a statement exception handling. When there are no exceptions raised inside the try block, we can use the else keyword to execute a block of code. So now let's save it and run it. So enter age, say test, and now we can see inside the else keyword, so that is where we are focusing now, we can see exception handling and easy to learn. So since there is no exception raised inside the try block, this except block will not be executed, and we can execute a block of code by using the else keyword. Now let's see how to use finally block. Let's try to print finally block, and let's try to take the same code, try block, we have 0 division error, and except block we are catching the exception that is zero division error code. And now let's create a finally block by using the finally keyword. And within the finally block, let's add a statement. Finally block gets executed regardless of exception raised or not, or caught or not. So this will be the default block of code that will be executed regardless of the exception is raised or the exception is caught. So now let's save it and run. So now we can see inside a finally block, we see zero division error occurred. So here in this case, the exception is raised and it is caught by the except block. So we are saying zero division error occurred. And also we see the statement finally block gets executed regardless of exception raised or caught or not. So it doesn't matter whether we raise the exception inside a try block or whether the exception is caught inside a except block, the finally block gets executed. So that is how we can create a finally block. Now the last one, how to use raise keyword to throw or raise an user-friendly exception. So now let's create an integer variable height 6 and add a condition. If not, type height is float. Use the raise keyword to raise an user-friendly exception and pass the comment. Height needs to be floating point number. Now let's save it and run. So now we can see type error, height needs to be floating point number. So that is the user-friendly exception we can pass by using the raise keyword. So here we are passing an integer variable. So let's try to pass a floating point value to the height variable. So now we are not seeing the message type error because we are passing the floating point variable. So instead, if you pass an integer variable and if you are checking the condition here, if the type of height, if it is not float, then throw an user-friendly exception instead of just sending type error. So we are passing an user-friendly message by using the raise keyword. So that's all about exception handling. All right, see you in the next lecture.